It was 9:11 p.m. inside the United States Capitol building. The place felt tense, like something was about to break. President Donald J. Trump walked down the middle of the room. Many people cheered loudly, shouting, "USA!" They were Republicans. But many others, mostly Democrats, sat quietly, without a sound. The room clearly showed how divided people were. President Trump was there to give a big speech. It was called the State of the Union Address. Many people felt it was a very hard and important time for the country. There were many problems. The government was partly shut down, and this was its second week. Just 4 days before, the Supreme Court had stopped a major money plan from President Trump. Also, there was military trouble far away in the Middle East. People were very sad and angry about 2 Americans who had been killed in Minneapolis during a government action. New elections were coming soon, in less than 9 months. The mood in Washington and across the country was very heavy. President Trump stood at a special desk where speakers stand. On this desk there was a special hammer called a gavel. This gavel once belonged to George Washington, America's first president. It was placed there to honor America's 250th birthday, which was coming soon. It made the moment feel very important. President Trump started his speech with a very strong sentence. He said, "The state of our union is strong." This statement sounded very different depending on who heard it.
For Republicans, it brought loud applause and happy faces. For many others, especially Democrats, it simply did not feel true. Many Americans believed the country was not doing well at all. The people in the room showed this division with their actions. For example, many women Democrats wore white clothes. This was a symbol from a long time ago, used by women who fought for the right to vote. Before the president even started talking, some people protested. Representative Al Green held up a sign, and security guards quickly took him out of the room. Even 4 Supreme Court justices were there. President Trump had spoken against some of them before, but they still came to show their work was important. The whole atmosphere in the chamber was full of strong emotions. How could President Trump declare the country strong? Half of the government was not working. People were protesting openly, and some were even removed. This chapter showed how difficult and divided the situation was, even before the president said anything more. It set the stage for a very important night. 2. The big problems before the speech. The week before President Donald Trump's important speech was full of big problems. Washington, D.C. was in chaos. Many things went wrong, putting a lot of pressure on the president. He needed to show strong leadership after several hard events. Just 4 days before the speech, the Supreme Court made a major decision. This court is the highest in the country.
It's said that President Trump's main plan for money, which used many tariffs, was not legal. Tariffs are special taxes on goods from other countries. This was a big surprise because 3 of the 9 judges on the court, John Roberts, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett, usually agreed with President Trump. But this time, they voted against his plan. This ruling took away a key tool from the president. He was very angry and called these judges disloyal. He quickly said he would find other ways to put the tariffs back. Another strange thing happened with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. This department was led by Elon Musk. Its goal was to make the government smaller and work better. It laid off thousands of government workers and cut money from many agencies. But then, in November 2025, Doge suddenly closed its doors. This was much earlier than planned, as it was supposed to close in July 2026. After Doge closed, the government had to hire back hundreds of workers because they were needed for basic tasks. The early closure of Doge created confusion and showed that some of the big changes did not work as planned. At the same time, parts of the government were shut down. This meant some government workers were not getting paid, and some services stopped. The shutdown began because of big problems with immigration. Federal agents had killed 2 American citizens during immigration actions in Minneapolis. This made many people upset. Democrats in Congress demanded new rules for how immigration officers work. Because of this, they would not approve money for the Department of Homeland Security. This meant the government could not fully work, and Washington, D.C. felt paralyzed. These events, the Supreme Court's decision, the closing of Doge, and the government shutdown, created a tough situation for President Trump. He had enjoyed complete control of Washington in his second term, with his party leading both the Senate and the House. But now, after a week of legal problems and political setbacks, he faced strong challenges. Recent polls showed that many Americans felt the country was not doing well. The president felt immense pressure to show he was still in charge and could make things better for the country. He had to convince the American people that the Union was strong, despite all the big problems. 3. Money and jobs. President Donald Trump spoke a lot about the economy. He said the country's money situation was great. He told everyone that prices were falling fast and that people were earning more money. He believed the economy was roaring like never before. A big part of his plan was something called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This act was a tax cut. It continued some tax reductions from 2017. It also added new ways for people to pay less tax on things like tips, extra work hours, and Social Security benefits.
President Trump often said this was the biggest tax cut in American history. However, some studies, like one from the Tax Foundation, showed it was actually the 6th largest tax cut. Experts also looked at who would benefit most from this tax cut. They found that rich people would save the most money. Middle-income families might see a smaller benefit, perhaps between $500 and $1,000 each year. For families who earned less than $55,000 a year, some reports suggested they might even be worse off when all changes were counted. The president also talked about inflation, which is when prices go up. He said inflation was plummeting. It was true that the price of eggs went down a lot, about 48%, from January 2025 to January 2026.
However, information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that about 44,000 new construction jobs were added in 1 year, from January 2025 to January 2026. This was fewer than the 70,000 jobs President Trump had mentioned. Then President Trump made a very big promise. He suggested that tariffs could one day substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax. Tariffs are taxes on goods that come into the country from other nations. He said this would remove a great financial burden from the American people. Many economists who study money found it hard to believe this was possible. They said the government needed too much money, and current trade taxes were not big enough to replace income tax. This idea was not new for President Trump, but saying it after the Supreme Court had just ruled against his use of tariffs made it even more important. He promised to use other laws to put tariffs back in place. So, the economy was a key focus of President Trump's speech. He offered bold promises, from tax cuts to replacing income tax with tariffs. This left many people wondering if these big ideas were truly smart, or if they were impossible, risking the nation's money future. 4. The border and the wall. The speech moved to the topic of immigration, which brought forth strong emotions and clear divisions in the Capitol chamber. President Donald Trump spoke at length about the nation's borders.
He asked all lawmakers present to stand and show their support for a core idea, that the government's most important duty is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. This statement set a clear tone for this part of his address. Immediately, a stark visual contrast emerged. Many Republican members of Congress rose to their feet, clapping loudly and cheering. Their enthusiastic response showed strong agreement with the president. In contrast, most Democratic lawmakers remained in their seats, choosing not to applaud. This visible difference in reaction highlighted the deep political divide within the room. Observing the many seated Democrats, President Trump then directly addressed them with a firm rebuke. He stated, "You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up." At this tense point, a dramatic interruption occurred. Representative Ilhan Omar, a Democrat from Minnesota, spoke out in protest. She accused the president of being responsible for the deaths of Americans. She was referring to the tragic killings of two United States citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, in Minneapolis. Federal agents had killed them during an immigration enforcement operation, an event that had caused significant public outcry and debate. President Trump quickly and directly responded to Representative Omar's accusation. He shot back at her, saying, "You should be ashamed." This sharp, immediate exchange between the president and the congresswoman instantly became one of the most widely discussed and shared moments of the night on social media. It served as a powerful symbol of the profound and often heated disagreements among the nation's leaders, creating a vivid us versus them dynamic in the chamber. Following this heated exchange, President Trump continued to speak about his administration's actions. He claimed the country now had the most secure border in American history by far, emphasizing successful efforts to control who enters the country. He also praised ongoing work to stop the dangerous drug fentanyl from flowing across the border. Additionally, he noted that murder rates across the nation were falling, suggesting that his policies were making communities safer. However, a major problem loomed. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, was in the middle of a partial government shutdown. This shutdown was still in effect as President Trump delivered his speech. He directly blamed Democrats for this situation. He told the gathered lawmakers, "Democrats in this chamber have cut off all funding for the Department of Homeland Security." He also pointed out that the shutdown was even preventing the federal government from providing help to clear snow after recent severe storms, affecting many citizens. The reasons behind the DHS shutdown were complex and showed a deep political stalemate.
Democrats had refused to approve funding for DHS unless certain changes were made regarding the accountability of federal agents. These demands were especially strong following the Minneapolis killings. Despite intense negotiations between Republicans, Democrats, and the White House, an agreement could not be reached. This political deadlock led to the shutdown. The entire segment of the speech, marked by strong reactions, cheers, protests, and a direct verbal clash,
vividly illustrated the deep divisions over border and immigration policies. This single moment of heckling and the president's response clearly showed the evening's intense political split. 5. War and peace. The talk about war was a big worry for many people. President Donald Trump spoke about global problems and the chance of conflict. He said he wanted peace for the world, but he also spoke strongly about Iran. This mix of messages made some people feel uneasy and unsure about the future. Just before President Trump's important speech, serious military actions took place. The American military sent a second large aircraft carrier to the Middle East. This big warship travels with many other ships and planes. More fighter jets also went to the region. These movements showed that the situation with Iran was very tense. Also, top officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and CIA Director John Ratcliffe held secret meetings.
They talked about Iran with important members of Congress just hours before President Trump spoke. These private talks highlighted the serious nature of the threat. During his speech, President Trump presented two different ideas about foreign policy. He said he was a peacemaker. He even told the audience that his government had stopped 8 wars in his first 10 months in office. He also talked about the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. He said he was working hard to end the fighting, where thousands of soldiers were dying each month. He also claimed this war would never have started if he were president. These were big claims that caused many discussions. However, when President Trump talked about Iran, his words were different. He claimed Iran desperately wants a deal with the United States, but he also stated that Iran just can't say the sacred phrase, "We won't build nuclear weapons." President Trump had said before that Iranian nuclear sites were totally destroyed in past attacks. Yet now he suggested that further attacks might be needed. He said this would be to permanently stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. He often spoke about peace through strength. This idea means that a country can keep peace by being very strong in its military. This approach, however, made some people wonder if the United States might accidentally start a bigger conflict, perhaps even a nuclear war, with Iran.
The thought of a nuclear conflict created a strong sense of fear and worry about global safety. President Trump did mention that talks were planned in Geneva for later in the week. This showed that diplomacy, or trying to solve problems through talks, was still happening at the same time as the military actions. But many important questions remained. The U.S. Constitution says that Congress has the power to declare war. However, there was no clear agreement or permission from Congress for any new military action against Iran. This unclear situation made the future of peace and war seem very uncertain and added to the world's unease. 6. Is it true? When we listen to a big speech, asking, "Is it true?" is important. After President Trump's speech, many wanted facts. We will look closely at his claims, like a detective. President Trump spoke about energy production. He said America produced record amounts. Official data showed natural gas output was very high, but crude oil output was expected to drop in 2026. Also, drilling sites were fewer than last year. The full picture was complex. He also claimed more Americans were working than ever, with all new jobs from private companies.
But official numbers showed fewer new construction jobs than he claimed. For instance, 44,000 instead of 70,000. A big claim was about taxes. President Trump said his One Big Beautiful Bill Act was the largest tax cut in United States history.
Experts found it was the sixth largest, not the biggest. Most money saved went to the richest. Middle-income families got smaller benefits. Some lower-income families might even lose money. President Trump also said there would be no tax on tips, overtime, or Social Security. While the new law reduced these taxes, it did not remove them completely. People still paid some tax. He spoke about inflation, saying it was defeated. Egg prices dropped by nearly half, but other food prices like beef reached record highs. The yearly inflation rate was 2.4%. This was better than before, but prices were still rising, not fully defeated. Finally, President Trump blamed only Democrats for the government shutdown, but official reports showed both sides were responsible. They could not agree on rules for federal agents handling immigration. Comparing the president's words with official information shows a more complete truth. Some things he said were correct, some partly true, and some not accurate. This helps people understand the real situation. 7. The other side speaks. After President Trump's speech, the other side had its turn. Governor Abigail Spanberger of Virginia gave the official Democratic response. She spoke from Colonial Williamsburg. This place is a living history museum in Virginia. It looks like America in the 1700s. Democrats chose it to show a connection to old American values and resistance to too much power.
Governor Spanberger is important for the Democratic Party. She was a CIA officer before she worked in Congress for 6 years. Later, she became Virginia's first female governor. She won her election by a large margin, even though President Trump had won Virginia in 2024. Party leaders saw her as a good example of calm and effective leadership. They believed she could connect with voters who did not always pick one party. This included people in suburban areas and those who vote independently. Her message was clear. She spoke about making everyday life more affordable. This included reducing the cost of groceries and other basic needs. She also talked about protecting health care and defending important freedoms. The Democrats planned this focus on money matters very carefully. A recent poll showed that many Americans, 57%, wanted President Trump to talk about the economy the most. Immigration was a much smaller concern for voters. Governor Spanberger gave her speech with college students and community leaders around her. This was different from the formal setting of the Capitol building where President Trump spoke. Senator Alex Padilla from California also gave a response in Spanish. He is the son of Mexican immigrants and was the first Latino senator for California. This showed the Democrats wanted to reach out to Latino voters. Representative Summer Lee from Pennsylvania gave a third response for the Progressive Working Families Party.
All these responses were part of a bigger plan. The midterm elections were coming in November 2026. Control of Congress was at risk. The Republican Party had a very small majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats hoped their focus on real-life costs would help them win many votes. They wanted to show that they understood the everyday problems of American families. This chapter showed how fragile the Republican majority was and how much the Democrats wanted to change things. 8. What happens next? The long speech was over, but many questions remained. The Supreme Court justices sat quietly, even after President Donald Trump had spoken about their decisions. He had criticized them for saying no to some of his money plans. Now everyone wondered what would happen next with the country's laws and economy. Soon, in November, there will be big elections for Congress. People across the country will vote. These elections will decide if President Trump's party will keep control of Congress. This is very important for his future plans. Many citizens are watching closely, thinking about who to vote for. Far away, there are still worries about war. President Trump talked about Iran. He sent more ships and planes to the Middle East. He also said there would be talks, but no one knows if new fighting will start. The war in Ukraine has now lasted 4 years. President Trump believes he can help stop it, but a clear path to peace is still not seen.
These big global issues need answers soon. At home, money matters are still on people's minds. The government passed a new tax law, which means some people will pay less tax. But this might also make the national debt bigger. President Trump did not talk much about this problem. Also, there are still sad questions about the deaths in Minneapolis from earlier this year. And the government group that aimed to be more efficient closed suddenly, leaving many people wondering about its true effect. President Donald Trump said the country is strong. He believes he has changed the country in a big way, but many people are not sure. There are big problems like high prices for some food, the chance of more war, and deep disagreements between people in the country. Can the country stay together and strong with all these challenges? The country is almost 250 years old. Its first leaders created a system where different parts of the government can check each other. This can cause some tension, but it is part of how the country works. Now, the Supreme Court, Congress, and the President do not always agree. The newspapers and TV channels are checking everything the President says. And the people, the voters, will soon give their answer. This speech by President Trump gave some ideas, but it did not answer all the big questions for the future. Will food prices go down? Will there be peace or war? What do you think will happen next for the country?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world.